Hi chess friends, this is King's Executor and this video is going to be in English again, so don't become jealous. Just I made German videos because really there's a lack of good German chess videos on YouTube, so this is why I made that, to see the reaction of the German speaking viewers. Okay, again Benko Gambit, so that the English speaking people around the world don't have a disadvantage. This is a game between Victoria Cmilyte, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, and Vugar Rasulov, both rated 25, 22 and 25, 15, so very strong players, grandmasters I guess, and they played at the Turkish Bank Chess League 2012, and this is a Benko Gambit, as I said. Let's look how it went. We have here the Benko Gambit by b5, and this is accepted fully. g6, here the popular move to prevent b3. b3 would be a weakening move afterwards, because, well, if b3 to play bishop b2 afterwards, then black can exploit this weakened diagonal. Let's just see, black can play all sorts of moves here. I think in this position knight takes is a little bit better than bishop takes, because the knight can hop here. This is based on the fact that if knight c3 comes, then there's a pin because of knight e4, and then these pieces are hanging. Okay, so the knight on c3 isn't really defending the pawn on a2 afterwards, which makes this knight very strong in conjunction with the rook attacking the a2 pawn. Let's just see. Let's say knight c3 here. Well, knight b4, and if a3 for example, then knight e4, and now you see what I meant. And if takes, then bishop takes, check, knight c3 attacking the queen, and queen c1 to protect the rook, and then you can take the rook, and afterwards see, the knight is sitting very nicely on c3. This is just one example of exploiting these this weakened diagonal. So g6 in this position is designed to prevent b3. Knight c3. Now bishop takes. If there is no reason to take with the knight, you should take with the bishop to destroy white's castling rights, if possible. And we see that here in this game. This is the main line. d6 to stop e5, g3, bishop g7, king g2, castles, knight comes out, and black sets up the typical Benko formation. And after a4, which is an attempt to establish a blockade on the queen side with knight b5, b3, and then you would have this nice blockade, and that would mean a quite passive fate for black, because the only open files are blocked. In this situation, Cmilyte played rook a6, and after queen c2, that prepares, for example, rook d1. The queen is also keeping an eye on the knight. If the knight comes here, and maybe black has an idea of course getting here, but in between taking this knight, and if the queen wasn't there, there would be a recapturing by the pawn, and then this pawn would be weak, I think. And this idea is killed dead in its tracks. And of course it's a normal developing move. Queen a8. This is based on the fact that the king here is on that same diagonal as the queen, and an e5 push would seem less favorable for white. For example, this knight can come here, and after a prepared move like rook e1 and prepared e5, this pawn on d5 becomes vulnerable. Knight b5, and now queen b7, so we still stay on that diagonal, and now we can always put the rook here if you want to, or on b8. Bishop g5 to stop that maneuver, or at least forcing h6, a kind of weakening move, to be able to do that. But now this knight is simply taken, and black recaptures with the knight. Recapturing with the bishop is possible as well. Okay, but if you take with a knight, it's just what I see right now, is that you can come here and exchange off that knight. Otherwise the knight was here. From here it's impossible to exchange the knight directly. Rook ad1, and if there's a blockade on the queen side, then we have to open up the center. e6 was the move, which could have been prepared, but this is an okay move. But from this point on, there's a really lot of tactical opportunities for both sides going on. White played b3. This is a good move, but let's look at the other possibilities. If takes, well, then we can take this pawn and protect d6. We open up the line for our bishop. There's at least the idea of taking that that pawn, and if queen takes, we can even take this pawn, and then this knight would be pinned to the queen on b2, and then you can round up the knight by playing rook b4. This is the least idea here. Actually, there's even more going on with knight to g5, exploiting that diagonal. And now you see why sometimes it's preferred to play the fianchetto variation for white, having the bishop here and castling, but then again you don't know if this bishop is placed good with the white pawns in the center. Okay, you can't have everything at the same time in chess. You have to decide for one or the other. Taking on f7 in this position would be terrible, because then you would increase pressure on this diagonal, especially on f3. And now rook to d3 is forced. If you would play another random move, then knight g5 is winning. Rook d3 now, and now we can just take this and win a piece. So in this position, if knight g5 is threatening, rook d3 is forced. Knight g5 anyway, queen d1 defense, and now we can take the pawn, and white gets to take a pawn, takes, so we have an exchange here. The queen can centralize, takes, and now with this pressure on f2, white can take this and play h4, and now the defender of f3 is attacked, and if rook a3 takes, we get a drawn position here. Let's go back to this position. If takes on f7 is not the best, what if e7 is e7, rook e8, rook h1, takes, and now b3 is not as good as the game continuation because you gave black this this mobile pawn center. So d5 could be a move in this position here. Yeah. So this is why in this position after e6 by black, white did better by playing b3, keeping the position rather closed. This pawn was taken to again open up the only active file for black because the queen side is blocked. So rook e8, queen d3, rook e4, rook h1, and now black is trying to find counterplay on the queen side here. King g1 getting out of the diagonal. Bishop f8 protecting d6, but also freeing up this knight so it doesn't have to defend for any checks. Knight h4, queen d7, knight g2. So this knight, well, on f3 it didn't have the opportunity to do anything good here on f3. So queen f5. Well, if white would have a light squared bishop in this position, I think white would have a lot of problems here, as in my game with Leningrad Dutch atomic dart arrow is the name of the video clip. But of course here white is just maneuvering to find a better location for the knight, but black really gets quite active here. In this position knight e3 was played, and well, taking here seems to be a interesting option, doubling black's pawns. Well, and let's say knight e3 here, we can immediately push f4, and this rook really does a nice job here. So what else? If rook d3, then c4 is possible, and if takes, then we can take, and now suddenly it seems that black's lines open up a little bit, and yeah, but it's not easy, of course, not at all. If knight e3, rook takes a4, and now you see that white still has a good game here. This was an option, but after queen f5, knight e3 was played, and now black really gets to hop into the weakened light squares. h3 to keep the knight out of g4, but that still allows knight e4, pressurizing f2, so rook back to f1, and now knight g5 attacking the h pawn. and after knight c4, takes, check, takes, knight takes d6. So from this point on, really, black has solved his positional problems after having shortage of activity or space. Knight d4, rook a1, rook b4, takes, rook b1, trying to infiltrate on the back rank, rook b4, rook a1, knight f5. And after rook a8, we exchange the pieces here, and rook d4. Knight e8, and if we take the pawn on d5, then we lose the rook, so the pawn is immune. King h7, getting out of the rook's file. Rook a7, forcing king back, and now the rook watches over the pawn. c4, rook c6, to protect the d6 square, to push d6, bishop b4, protecting c3, the c3 square, to push on, d6, d3, and rook c8, and in this position both players agree to a draw. Well, let's just look. If c2, of course, both can just exchange the pawns, and if d7, again, black cannot take on d7 because of the fork, so bishop would have come to back to e7, covering the queening square, and if check, then you see we have a perpetual here. Okay, I hope you liked the video. Please comment, rate, and subscribe. Thanks.